I'm joined now from Phoenix by James Reyes, a planetary scientist working on the Mars Exploration Rover project, and he's a senior scientist at the Planetary Science Institute. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So the United States has moved toward a more private-funded model of space exploration. China, though, is beginning to open up more space opportunities to Chinese companies. Is there a benefit to the privatization of space exploration?
Well, I mean, competition is always a good thing because it brings the best out in the people who are competing for that. For the United States, NASA is still the primary space exploration agency, and there are, as you mentioned, some private companies who are starting to get involved in that, like SpaceX and Blue Origins. But they still have a lot to prove. They're very in the early stages of their development and flight testing. So really, for doing lunar exploration or planetary exploration, NASA is still the main player in the United States, and of course, China, the Chinese Space Agency, is leading the Chinese effort as in the lunar effort and planetary effort.
Earlier this month, we saw a private U.S. company, you mentioned SpaceX, carry a Chinese experiment to the International Space Station, and that is despite a U.S. ban on working with China in space. So how significant was that to the future of space programs in general?
Well, it was a private company, so they can fly whoever payload they want, as long as they have a paying customer. I think that opens up the avenue for that to happen, even though, the United States and China officially aren't formally agreeing on space efforts to this day. And I'm reminded things could change because I grew up in during the Cold War, the 1960s, 1970s, and the Soviet Union, United States were adversaries. And yet, in 1975, we had the Apollo-Soyuz mission, which was a joint docking between the Soviet Soyuz spacecraft and the American Apollo. And then, of course, now we're working in cooperation with the Russians on the International Space Station, which has been manned since the year 2000. So things can change, and it's like I said, growing up in the era that I did, I never thought the U.S. and the Soviet or the Russians would be working together. But now, like I said, we've been doing that now for almost 2 decades, and so I think things can change in the future. Although right now, where things stand, the NASA and the Chinese Space Agency, they're not in any kind of formal agreements right now. But like I said, those things can change in the future.
James, I want to point to an article, a recent article in the publication Foreign Policy. It said China's space program is highly advanced and extremely ambitious. Now we know about China's plans for a Mars probe and a space station. What is most exciting to you?
To me, I think the mission this November, going to the moon and bringing samples back, I'm pretty excited about that because this will be the first time any samples have been returned from the moon since 1976. That was a Soviet mission called Luna 24. It brought back only about 100 grams of lunar soil and rock. So that mission will be exciting because it's got an interesting landing site. It's supposed to be going to the northern part of the ocean and storms on the moon, near these volcanic domes called Mons Rumker. And no mission's ever been there before, so that's interesting. And then, as the report earlier, in 2018, there's a Chinese mission planning to land on the far side of the moon, which has never been done before. So that's interesting to me. I'm a Mars rover guy. I work on the Mars rover, the geology team leaders. And their Mars mission in 2020 is also interesting because the Chinese are going to try to have an orbiter, a lander, and a rover all together in their first attempt at Mars. And that'll be interesting if that is a successful mission and all 3 components are just in any of it. Mars is a very difficult place. The Soviet Union or Russia today has never had a successful mission to Mars, and so I'm interested in all this because, like I said, the more nations that are doing this, or companies, or whoever's in the player are, it's interesting because you get a lot more competition, you get a lot more mission opportunities and places to learn about the moon or Mars, as we're talking about here.
All exciting stuff. James Reyes in Phoenix, thank you for joining us.